Welcome to the Catholic Leadership Network podcast, where we connect the wisdom and experience of ministry leaders to the realities of ministry in the trenches. We journey with ministry leaders through all the hidden aspects that help us to become fruitful ministers. Here at the Catholic Leadership Network podcast, we discuss the stuff that no one told you about Catholic ministry and strive to help ministry leaders succeed from the beginning. Our hosts are Christy the Director for Missionary Discipleship for the Diocese of Cleveland, and Sarah Jarzembowski, the Director for Marriage and Family Life at St. Elizabeth Ann Seton Parish in Crofton, Maryland. Please show your support for our efforts by clicking like and subscribe and commenting below. And now here are Sarah and Christy. It's going to be one of those podcasts, friends. I was doing fine until I hit record.
Hang on.
We've got John Roberto with us, author of Lifelong Faith and executive director for the National Community of Catechetical Leaders, also known as NCCL. We are so glad that you're here to join us, John. I have so many of your writings, old school writings, and these are from this is Lifelong Faith, the magazine that you put out through Lifelong Faith Formation many years ago. This one's 2007. And then I have some of the books that you put out online, Reimagining Faith Formation for the 21st Century. I've got it in a 3-ring binder here, which I just think was great. I actually went through, I think it was this one for one of my master's classes, which was wonderful. So this one's got all sorts of like highlights and underlines. And then I also have here Faith Formation 2020 that I think we also went through in my course. And I think it's really interesting what you thought 2020 was going to look like back in 2010 and what actually happened in 2020. And how much of this we probably should have gone through. Like you were ahead of the time back in 2010.
I worked with a great team of people on that project, and little did we know that looking at these 4 scenarios about the rise of the unaffiliated, the rise of the nuns, the diversity of religious faith and practice, how widespread that would become. Now, the book doesn't predict the pandemic of 2020, but it does say, well, what would it be like if you took these trends seriously? And I think we're still asking that question today. How do we address, especially from catechetical and faith formation point of view, how do you address this wide range now in religious faith and practice within all of our churches? And so that question still sits there. So I have people who read the 2020 book and say, was this just published? And I said, no, this is back in 2010. And they went, oh, well, because you could see the trend lines, and the group that I gathered with, just all national leader people, we're saying these are what we're seeing, and what if this becomes the big trend? And it ended up being the big trend over the decade.
Yeah, and there's just some really great tools in there that I noticed really kind of came to the forefront, and those places that were really paying attention to family formation and paying attention to digital media and media online and ways to get resources into the hands of families and young people were made that transition during the pandemic much easier than those who had not. So this I thought was really just fascinating.
I've watched, and across all the Christian churches, Catholic and Protestant, the churches that have been more family or intergenerationally, like community minded in their catechetical or faith formation programming, and those that have started using the digital tools, building a website, doing things, webinars, things that we did in the 2010s to reach people, and started thinking about how do I engage people where they are. When the pandemic hit, they just kind of upped their game because they already had the platform. And coming out of it, this has been part of the culture of their church. This is how we do faith formation. The ones that hadn't prepared, I think, really struggled mightily.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of reaching people during the pandemic. And even today, many have gone back to the models of faith formation and catechesis they were doing prior to the pandemic, with less success because so much has changed in the last 4 years.
Yeah,
especially
we're taking notes, folks. That's the siren.
Yeah, I was
You
gonna
need
say
to
sorry
freeze
about
it.
that, you guys.
need to freeze our
what-
recording this time.
what occurred to me there, John, was the question of creativity, because I don't, okay, sorry, listeners, I don't want for this to sound like I'm criticizing, but I think that some folks get into these roles and they started off by running programs, and then that gets really comfortable. And so then trying to have an imagination around what this could look like. And I think too, on that same front, like accepting challenges, when parents push back and say like, I don't know why we're doing this. And you just say, because we have to. Where do you think, I think that my question is, what do you think the capacity is for creativity? And I know we need to cultivate it, but how?
Right. Absolutely. So when we're thinking about a lot of our faith formation programming, especially the pre-designed programs, they all come with a set of assumptions built into them. So,
Mm,
for example, most of our catechetical texts in the Catholic world are built on the assumption that those young people are coming from families that practice their faith and go to mass on Sunday.
yeah.
And in other words, when they come to first Eucharist preparation, they have 6 or 7 years, 8 years of experience with Catholicism by practicing, by praying at home and the rest. And what has kind of, I would say it, catechetical leaders have been kind of stunned a bit by the fact that so many come without even the most basic knowledge of how to say the Our Father, just basic things. Well, that's a reflection of the changed religious landscape and people in our parishes. And the response to it isn't to double down on the resource, but to say that resource was created with a set of assumptions that are no longer true.
Mm,
So how do we create resources, programming that's built around today's people? And I think this move to family catechesis, which actually, we've had, this is not the first time. In the 1980s, we had an emphasis on that, in the early 2000s. But I think now the impetus is we're now working with the families and really building up the faith of families and supporting them, encouraging them, accompany them, that without family faith formation happening, in whatever shape it takes, it doesn't have to be a formal family catechesis program, but nurturing the faith of families. It's what people bring to our catechetical programs, parents and young people, children, teens, that's really, really important. And so the key is whenever people are selecting curricula or programming, one of my first questions is, what assumptions about the people, the learner, is it making? And
mm,
if it's a one size fits all approach today, it's not going to work because we have such diversity. 20 years ago, there was some diversity, but you could have kind of a one size fits all, like, especially like an adult catechesis or adult faith formation, where we're offering our adult faith formation program for the whole parish. And I'm thinking, for all those adults? Like, so from moving from one size fits all to one size fits one. And when I mean one, I don't mean just individual, but a group of people who
right.
are the same interest or same faith practice or that kind of thing. So that's the big shift. So it's not that we're not going to have resources or programs, but always, if you're a catechetical leader, your first look at it is, who is this for and what assumptions is it making about those people? And is that true for my parish? And I think it moves us away from the kind of the one size fits all resource to being able to use things in more modular or targeted fashion.
Mm.
Now, I know textbooks aren't written that way, but in fact, they can be used that way,
Oh, yeah.
and you can use them in units. You don't have to be the same sequence. I mean, you could do lots of things. You don't have to be age graded. You could be grouping oriented, meaning younger grades are grouped together, middle school together. So there's ways of doing that. And the key in our era, I think, is how we personalize our catechesis around the people and not have people fit our programs. And I think that's the decade-long shift. The pandemic accelerated that because now you have a lot more diversity in people's participation in parish life. And so the key is, how do I personalize or target our catechetical programming around the people? And when you do that, you're gonna be more creative. That's number one. You have to respond to that. But you're also going to tap other gifts that you didn't necessarily need when you need a catechist for your different grade levels. You're going to tap people who are really good in social media and digital tools to reach people. You're going to tap parents We're willing to, to run a small group of a family cluster, or a parent group. You're going to tap resources outside your parish and maybe do a monthly parent webinar with people who are not anywhere near the parish, but experts who can come into the parish. So the creativity is going to be how we use all of our resources, which are in abundance today, less so than how do we stick to our program. Our program's going to have to become programs if we're going to think about reaching our audience today.
Sarah, I feel like you had something to say in there.
No, there's just so much here. There's just so much here. Just that reminder that it doesn't necessarily have to be linear, right?
Correct.
We're so linear in our thinking, that's probably been the hardest thing for our parish to understand, and for folks to understand about our program, is that it program, like, I don't even know how to say what we do,
How do you name it?
like, other than program. It's nonlinear.
Sarah, process.
Perfect. I'm gonna write that down. Process. Thank you, Christy.
It's also very trendy right now, just throwing it out there.
Like, we have to change the words. Like, language affects how we feel about things, it does. And program is such a heavy word, and as soon as people come into it, it's heavy. Process and journey, that's like, oh, that's like fun and adventurous, and like different things are going to happen, and what are we going to learn today?
Yeah.
That's intriguing, so words matter.
Yes.
And
Say it again. Say it again. Say it again.
Say what again?
What you just said.
I don't know. I don't know.
You said words matter.
What?
They matter. They matter.
How you name what you do communicates your vision behind the programming you do.
Oh, see, we got to go back to that whole vision thing that we talked about. We talked with Bob McCarty 2 weeks ago, and we were talking about vision and vision statements and things like that. And gosh, we went off on a tangent with that. But I think that reminds us that, like, he just chuckled, like, yeah, we go off on a tangent with Bob McCarty. Of course we did. We didn't get to any of our questions with him.
We're not on a good start right now, just saying.
No, but the shared vision piece is really important catechetically. We have the directory for catechesis, which is the shared vision of the Church Universal. And how we take that vision and say, this is what we're trying to accomplish in the lives of people in our parish community. See, we've thought about catechetical ministry as programming, and it is going to have programming. But if you just can reframe that and say, what's our vision for helping people mature in faith for a lifetime? And can you capture that in a vision statement? And I don't mean 30,000 feet. I mean, on the ground. This is what we're hoping to accomplish in the lives of our people. So when the directory says our goal is communion and intimacy with Jesus Christ for the rest of our lives, how do you make that real in people's lives? When it presents the 5 tasks of catechesis, how do you want to help them to know and celebrate and live and engage with their faith? So it's a simple process. It's not easy, but it's a simple process. And that shared vision, you communicate everywhere. And once you have a vision, then you could say, there's lots of ways, pathways to accomplish our vision, lots of ways to make this real for children and teens and young adults and families and all ages in our parish. So we're not locked into one way of doing it. We now have a variety of pathways to do what? Reach this vision, accomplish this vision of what we want to see happen in people's lives as they grow in faith and discipleship for a lifetime. Very possible. The directory is the starting point for me for that conversation. If every parish had that and you put it on I worked with the Christian Brothers schools on the West Coast province, San Francisco, New Orleans province. And you walk into a Christian Brothers school, one of their high schools, and everywhere are these 5 core principles of Lasallian education. You see it on the wall, you see it in banners, like you get absorbed into this culture of what it means to be a Christian Brothers school in the spirit of St. John Baptist de La Salle. And it communicates because it's embedded in the culture. Every parish can do that. And the parishes that are most effective catechetically have that. They may not know they have that, by the way. You have to say, what's your vision? Oh, I don't, but you see it on the walls, you see it in the conversation, you see it in the way they communicate about what we're trying to accomplish as we help people grow in faith and discipleship. Every parish can do that. And once you make that shift, then the world is open to all kinds of programs, activities, resources at home, at church, in the world, online. Doesn't make a difference, because you're focused on your vision and the goals you want. Once you make that shift, then you can get creative. So that's why sometimes this creativity discussion is a really good one, because if you can move to a shared vision with some goals for maturing in faith for everybody, now the question is, well, how do you want to accomplish that?
Yeah.
Not what program do you want to buy? How do we want to accomplish that? And then the last question is, what resources do we need to accomplish this? And then you could then purchase to your heart's content, right? Online, free for purchase. Then you have that conversation. But we started with, what resource do I need, rather than who are my people and what's our vision for maturing in faith with those people. If I get that, I'm off and running.
Yeah.
I'm
wanna add
doing
something
this
there.
all wrong.
Oh,
You know, I would say if you step back and you said, what's the vision that guides us? What, like, this is implicit. So like, this is moving from implicit to explicit.
Yeah.
So in parishes that have a vibrancy to them, they're operating from this shared vision, though they haven't articulated it.
Mm-hmm.
So this is kind of like a catechetical leaders retreat experience. Like, because what you're going to do is say, what do you like? What are your hopes and dreams for catechesis in our parish for all ages? And then what do you see? How would you uncover the characteristics of the vision that we already have?
Mm-hmm.
Because every parish has a culture. Some cultures promote growth in faith for everybody and engagement and mission of the world. Some cultures not so much, and some cultures actually hinder it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
mhm.
so what you want to do is you want to name that, and then you want to say, let's express and articulate this as a group, and then decide how we want to promote this through everything we do. Like I said, everything we do catechetically is reference to, this is what we're trying to accomplish in people's lives because of our vision. And if you ground that in the directory for catechesis, you ground that in what the church's vision is. So when people say, why are you doing that? You say, this is what the church is doing around the world. This is our shared vision. I always, in front of the directory for catechesis, I always put international in front of it, just so people know this wasn't just popped up in, conversation in a room somewhere, right? This is the international vision of catechesis for the church. And it's rich, it's ready to be used that way. So every parish has a vision. It needs to move from implicit to explicit if it's not already. And then that becomes a great, discernment process, of how this is working in our lives, and then being more explicit about it so we can actually plan around our vision. If parishes would make just that shift, you would stop thinking about what's the one program we have to do, or what's the one resource we have to do, or we have to call this number to order our textbook series next year. It would change that. You may still use textbooks. It's not against any resource, but why and how you use it is going to change when you have a shared vision and goals for maturing in faith. And now you can have a conversation about adults too. Because when you have a shared vision for maturing in faith, it's for 10 decades of the life cycle. It's for everybody. So what are we doing with people in their 20s and 30s? What are we doing with people in their 80s and 90s, who are still actively engaged in learning, that we should be that kind of a parish community that's a learning community.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me think though too, John, like you're not bringing people from wherever their starting point is to 100. So you're just, because it's a lifelong process, you're working with them in formation to help them move a few steps forward from where they are in the journey.
We use the Emmaus story all the time. It's everywhere today, and I'm an old guy, so I chuckle a little bit and say, wow, they rediscovered. I said, yeah, back in 1976, that was the guiding image of the Vision of Youth Ministry document in 1976. So this has a long tradition of our thinking about accompaniment, step by step, growth is gradual. And this whole concept of gradualism is in the directory. It's an ongoing gradual maturation in faith. And people are at all different points in that, but it's our task to pick them up and accompany them. Pope Francis is so clear about accompaniment, the walking with people. I mean, he uses that imagery all the time. We're in catechetical ministry. This ought to be the strength of catechetical ministry. We're here to walk with you, so maybe you should buy every catechetical leader a walking stick or something to symbolize, that it's accompaniment and walking with. You can't do two, you can't do four, but you can accompany with. And I just think that's central to everything we do. And it's so central to the directory and Pope Francis's images of what it means to help people mature and do evangelization and catechesis. We just make it our own. And it's so easy to embrace. It's work, but it's easy to embrace that vision and to visualize it and say, how do you accompany families with children? How do you accompany young families with young children?
Mm-hmm.
In those first 5 or 6 years of life, because it's all accompaniment. They're not coming to programs, right? How do you accompany young people? How do you accompany young adults in their journey? But also, how do you accompany the 75 and 80 and 85 and 90-year-olds in their third of life? I think the opportunities are endless because the vision opens all these doors for us. So people say, well, what's the church teaching about that? This is what the church is teaching. Open all those doors. Like God's going to walk through all those doors. Jesus walks through all those doors. Just open those doors. That's what it means to be a church community. So that's where the creativity will come from. Once you begin to recognize there's lots of ways to do this, but it's contextual. Every parish community around their context, their ethnicities, their socioeconomics, their history, it's contextual. We share a lot in common, and then we have uniqueness.
Wow. There's a whole lot to think about. I feel like, the more you're talking, I'm realizing that I'm just kind of grabbing at things and throwing the spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks, and I'm not necessarily sure that it's all connecting to that shared vision. I'm not sure that it's all, I don't know if there's a connecting piece other than Jesus.
It's a good connecting piece. I think what I think is important, and what Sarah's pointing out, is this: we went from one model paradigm, if you will, of forming faith that grew up, really grew up in the last century, especially in the 60s and 70s, right? And we're now in what's called a liminal period, the in-between. We haven't defined what the next paradigm is yet. We see glimmers, a little more family catechesis, a little more communal rather than individual, a little more personal than one size fits all. So we have some of these elements, but in the liminal period, it is the spaghetti on the wall, all right? It is trying a lot of things to see which ones get traction in my parish, in my community, with my people, with different ages and audiences. So liminality is really hard because you have to be comfortable with ambiguity and uncertainty. I'm not sure, so I tell people all the time when they're developing prototypes, and I think, yeah, well, how about if some of these don't work? And I think, look, you try 5 things. If 3 of them work, you're batting 600.
Yeah.
There's no one in the history of Major League Baseball who's ever batted 600. You're doing good, because the 2 that didn't work so well, you're going to learn from. And the next prototype or the next new project is going to benefit from what you learn. So in the period of so this wasn't true in paradigm 1, we nailed it all down, and then the world changed, and we're in this middle of this paradigm shift towards a model not well defined just yet, or models not defined yet, but new paradigm. Liminality is fine because it's a chance to be creative, try new things. So if things aren't working, stop them. Don't keep on resuscitating, programs that really need to just let go. Try some new things. to find out what is going to get the most traction. And we have a lot. See, the nice thing is, in the midst of this transition, with all the ambiguity, there's lots of resources. There's an abundance of resources in all shapes and forms. There's lots of examples of what people are doing. So you can find where the bright spots are. You can say, how would this work with where I am? Or I'm going to take this, I'm going to tweak this for my people. So once you're driven by that vision, and once you have a good understanding of your people and their needs, you can make it through the ambiguity of liminality towards a new paradigm or paradigms that are going to emerge. But we're not there yet, So like over the 2010s, we experienced a lot of disruption. Then the pandemic, which was the big disruption, right? And now we're trying to find out what's the new stability or equilibrium we need to set. If you get there too quick, it doesn't work. If you take your time trying to figure that out, you establish that equilibrium or the new paradigm. This is just the way change happens, from equilibrium 1 to equilibrium 2, and then liminality is always in the middle of that, the change process. That's where the church is. Whether it likes it or not, that's where the church is in the U.S. And I think it's around the world, but the Catholic Church in the U.S., that's where we are. So that's why people want to go back to certain old ways of doing things, because they were secure, and they may work for a while. But the task is, how do you move forward? This is the chance to experience the change that we need to be able to find out what is it that and the directory, for at least the catechetical world, the directory provides ample resources to be able to think that through, and then all the examples we have around us and resources that we can try. And it's also making our parish communities comfortable with, not everything we're going to do is going to work. Be patient. Because people have a acceptance of the established program, even if it's not working so well, it's what we've always done, right? And you try something new, well, it didn't work as well as the other. Yeah, but it was the first time we did it. The other program's been around for 50 years. Like of course we're going to experience some, that process of developing, listening to our people based on the vision, developing innovation, big or small, trying that with our people and learning from it. That kind of a cyclic process is really, really important to embrace in every parish community. It's all relevant to, it's all related to how much capacity a particular parish community has. But you can always try small scale things and say, how do we tweak our first Eucharist prep to engage families more? How do we think about, we have baptism prep, we're not doing much with families. How can we, like, you start doing those little small experiments that begin to bear some fruit, and you take a 3 to 5 year perspective on this. Like, it's not all going to change in the fall of 24 or the fall of 25. It's going to take time to unfold. So I don't mind the spaghetti phase of this. You want to call it the spaghetti phase, throw things on the wall phase, because that's where you're learning. And I always say, catechetical leaders in parishes should be the best learners in their parish. We should always be learning from this.
Mm-hmm.
That's the era that we're in. And we should just simply say, okay, got to live with a little bit of ambiguity. It's not all well defined. And I got to live with a lot of uncertainty, because it's not. And so once you have, and once you're, you go back and say, my faith grounds me, that allows me to live with uncertainty and ambiguity, you're okay, But we need to support catechetical leaders in parishes. Without a support system and without colleagues and mentors to accompany us, it's a really hard thing to do it yourself. It just is. And that's why we see the turnover and the rest. It's just people don't feel the support, encouragement, the resourcing from their peers, their colleagues, their mentors in their lives. I just think that's incumbent upon us. I mean, I think of my work at NCCL, how do we support parish catechetical leaders, especially catechetical leaders who are not full-time paid professionals, but catechetical leaders maybe half-time, very part-time, and maybe not very well paid. How do we support them? Because without them, catechetical ministry in those parishes is not going to happen.
Yes.
I know, like that, just stunned silence, because so many.
Yes.
So many yeses in there.
Oh gosh.
John, the question I don't even know if I have it anymore. The two things that I was thinking were, as you were talking, is helping people who are resistant to change, but then secondarily, as you talked about this network of support, what I see from catechetical leaders is they'll put their heads down and focus on their own. I just did it myself with an adult formation thing. I know a person, I saw him the other day, and I felt like massive amounts of shame and embarrassment that, I mean, he was reaching out to me whenever I first started, and I haven't reached out to him since. How do we break out of this habit of putting our head down and trying to just focus on like what I'm doing, instead of pick up our chin and look around and realize that there's these people around us that love us and want to support us?
Yeah. I think, so I'll pick on adult catechesis for a minute because it's a good example. In many ways, if we could be a little bit more collaborative or partner with some of our neighboring parishes, like adult faith formation doesn't have to be that dramatically different from parish to parish to parish. It's going to have to be more diverse. It's going to have to offer lots of options. But I was working with a small group of parishes, and they said, "Oh, we can never build a website. We can never offer variety." I said, "Alone, you're correct. You don't have the capacity. But there's 6 of you here, and you're all within a half hour of each other. Why couldn't you build a shared adult faith formation website? You know,
Oh.
curate it together. Like you're approaching Lent. Why can't each of you take 1 week of Lent to offer a resource, to do an online presentation? Like you're doing your traditional Lenten series. Well, you don't, like the 24 people who show up every year for the one at your church. Why don't you rotate it around? People can drive, or you can drive them. If you do a morning and an evening, you get different age groups. So, but why don't you do one and you all share in that? And you could video record it. You can live stream it if you want. I said everybody gets a chance to host, provide, coffee and refreshments and the rest. But you only have to do one, not 6, just one. I said, use that model moving forward. So you could all have a robust, really vibrant adult faith formation. Doesn't mean you can't have particular things for your church. I mean, you might, here's something that we're doing at our church. We do our Good Friday Stations of the Cross at X month. Well, you simply put that on the website, St. X's is doing, okay. So you can have in common and unique. I said, but why work? Like, you're not going to do it if you work separately, because you're never going to have enough time. But if you work together and collaborate on this, you will have enough time, and you'll have each other's support. And what's better? I mean, like supporting each other, taking turns hosting things and planning together. So design together and then host uniquely. I think we could do a lot more of that. So it's a shared approach, but every parish takes a little bit of the responsibility for the program. And I think if you use that example, especially now where we're having multi-parish kind of clusters and stuff, all the different rearrangements of church life, I just think to identify things that can be done across churches, designed together, either implement uniquely or implement together, that you can decide that. But save the design time, because that's the time we don't usually have, is the time spent designing, curating resources, etc., before we implement. Do that together. I mean, like, it's the same Lenten readings across all our churches, right? Yeah, I mean, I might choose the Gospel of John for the 3rd, 4th, and 5th because of the RCIA, but it's the same lectionary. Like, why can't you design and work together on that? And nobody's getting huge numbers for adult faith formation, so partner on that. Or you want to design a new initiative for young families, so parents at baptism with the family. They're more alike than different from each other, no matter the parishes they're in. Why don't you design a young children, young family catechetical formation together? You'll implement it in your own parishes, but work together on it. Build one website that you all share, that kind of thing. There's the opportunities for that are available. Now, the bigger parishes, they have the capacity and the staff to do a lot on their own, but everybody needs support and sharing of ideas. And there's a role for dioceses, obviously, in this. that a lot of what people want to do is simply connect, share ideas. So host some great meals and, and coffee and donuts and whatever, or healthy food. And get people just to share with each other. They don't need more speakers necessarily. They need to be able to share and connect with each other. It's really, it's easy stuff to do, but I think there's opportunities. And so when we talk about how do I offer more variety, think about how I partner with other churches to do that.
That means leaving our ego at the door, though.
Oh, yeah, but bring your gifts instead.
Bring your gifts instead.
Yeah,
I absolutely love that. So,
yeah.
I just noticed we kind of blew past time, but I want to get to the most important question, which, John, what the most important question, which I just forgot.
What do you wish you knew when you first started in ministry?
Oh,
You're welcome.
Thanks, Christy. My brain and my mouth just did not.
That's why you collaborate, friends. That's why.
that's it. That's why we partner with each other. That's a good word.
Oh gosh.
So it's important to realize I started in youth ministry when I was in college, when I was 19 years old. This was back in 1969. So I've seen eras of this. And so like I call my kind of a life in decades kind of thing. I think the biggest learning, because I thought about this since you shared the question with me. I think the biggest learning is to think systemically about the big issues and concerns we face, whether it's in our parish or diocese. And when I think systemically, I mean this. So I grew up in youth ministry, and the kids get blamed all the time for not coming back after confirmation or not going to mass on Sunday. And we got into the habit of blaming the people. Like families didn't come back to mass on Sunday, that kind of thing. And I think what I learned over time, which I wish I knew early on, is that look at the system's roots of why that's happening. So for example, with young people, I've just seen, this is anecdotal, I wish I had some research studies, but the more sense of agency you give high school young people through youth ministry and confirmation programs, the more engagement in leadership, peer ministry, and really well-defined roles that they can be creative, and they grow into young adult believers and faithful people, because they have this sense of ownership and engagement. And so I started in youth ministry. I did that kind of thing, but I didn't see the other, like the lifelong picture that we need to have. So thinking systemically for me is most of the people problems that we identify are actually systems problems, that the faith forming system isn't working effectively. I mean, I saw that, but I don't think I really grabbed that until like when I started doing work in intergenerational lifelong faith formation in the 90s. I thought, this is a whole systems thing. Like we applied a systems approach to youth ministry, being more comprehensive approach, but taking that across 10 decades and saying, how do we think about the whole system of faith forming? And that these aren't people problems, they're systems problems, and we can change the system. You really can't change people. We like to believe we can. I even once believed that. You can't. What you can change is the way you work with people, the way you accompany and minister with people, and change the context. But I can change the system. I can change the way in which we do things. And I think we're still here today struggling with that. So I tend to be much more systemic, especially the last 20 years in lifelong faith formation and catechesis, thinking about the whole lifelong pattern. Every decade's part of that lifelong pattern. And you really can't understand young people, for example, if you don't understand from whence they come and where they're going. You certainly can't understand children's faith formation unless you understand their family and those families of origin before that. So that perspective now guides me. I don't know if I came to it late, but I certainly came to it in the 90s. And in my work with lifelong faith associates, in the intergenerational work, really helped me to see the whole lifelong pattern. And I kind of wish I had that. The other wish I had, though I had no control over this, I grew up in the analog era. And so all the resources were print resources, right? And then there was audio cassettes, that kind of thing.
What is that?
For the younger members of the community, look up Google audio cassettes, all right, or vinyl albums or black rotary dial phones, okay, all the above. But the blessings that have come, I know there's some downsides, but the blessings that come from the abundance of resources available digitally and online, I wish I had a tenth of that when I started in youth ministry in 69, and then later into the whole catechetical world, because the abundance of resources means that we can do all kinds of wonderful things in terms of addressing and targeting people catechetically and helping them grow in faith and discipleship. So not that I grew up in the wrong era, I wouldn't trade a minute of it, but I think the thinking systemically and then being able to use all our tools and resources, those are two things I've learned.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much, John. We appreciate the wisdom that you've gained in those decades and sharing that with us, because I think our lives and ministries are richer for you sharing that and having experienced that. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this week's Catholic Leadership Network podcast. We hope that you have gained some wisdom and insight here with us today. And if you have, please click like and subscribe and share this with your catechetical friends. Your shares and likes really do help us out here on the website and on the podcast. So we appreciate your help. So thank you so much, everybody, and we'll catch you the next time. Bye. Thank you for joining today's podcast. Please click the like and subscribe. And if you find this important to the conversations you're having in your local ministry, please share and join the conversation in the comments below. Thank you, and we'll see you next time on the Catholic Leadership Network podcast.